Hi, I'm Donna McNeil. I'm the Episcopal Campus Minister to Michigan State and the Associate Rector at All Saints Episcopal Church up the street from campus. And today I have the great pleasure of talking to Judi Harris, who is the Director of Refugee Services at St. Vincent Catholic Charities here in the Lansing area. Hi, Judi.
Hi, how are you?
Good. What else would you like us to know about you and who you are?
I guess mainly that I am the director of the Refugee Resettlement program here. I've been a refugee foster parent for 14 years, so I've had 10 refugee youth through my home over the last 14 years, so that's been a great experience. Before that, I worked overseas in refugee camps and in development in Cambodia and Haiti and in Macedonia. I was a Peace Corps volunteer in West Africa. I did refugee resettlement in Washington, D.C. as well at the national office.
Great. So you are the perfect person to talk to us about refugees and refugee resettlement. So people come to the United States through lots of different avenues, and as a refugee is one of those. What is a refugee?
So we work with people who fit the definition of a refugee through the United Nations, and that is someone who has been forced to flee their home because of war or conflict, or persecution on the grounds of race, religion, membership in a social group, nationality, and political opinion. And so those categories. And so we work with folks who have already been designated as a refugee by the United Nations or by a U.S. embassy overseas.
How does that happen?
Yeah, so there's a conflict or some kind of event happens in a country. People flee, they cross the border, they're intercepted by the United Nations or other groups that are helping to relieve the humanitarian crisis. They're interviewed by the United Nations and they're given that refugee status. And whether or not they ever become resettled is a whole nother process.
Okay.
Once resettlement opens up, then people, can be selected to come and be resettled in the United States or in another country.
Okay. How many refugees are there around the world? Roughly
Over about 80 million.
80 million.
Displaced people.
Mm-hmm.
I think about 30 million of them are refugees.
Okay.
The data right in front of me, but it's something like that.
Ballpark is sufficient. There will not be a quiz at the end of this for any of us. Where are the locations right now that are seeing the highest numbers of displaced people?
So the folks that we're working with primarily are coming from Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo, Sudan and South Sudan, Ethiopia, I'm scanning across Africa, sometimes from Burundi or Rwanda, depending on the situation, the Middle East, so Iraq and Syria, we're still getting people from Iraq and Syria, from Afghanistan, from Burma, especially the Muslim people from the northern part of the country, the Rohingya. Those are the main populations that we're resettling at this point.
So people coming across the southern border in the United States tend not to be refugees.
Well, they're not refugees yet.
Okay.
So they haven't received their designation as a refugee. They're considered asylum seekers until they cross over and get their asylee status. And so once they are asylees, we may be able to provide them some services, especially employment services, but it's not until they receive that designation by the U.S.
Okay. So do people, if someone has encountered the UN abroad, they've had to leave their home and maybe they've ended up in a refugee camp, or someone has directed them toward a UN intake desk, which may be literally a desk outdoors. Do they then get to say, I want to go to the US?
No, there's a long process that happens before that. And let me back up a little bit. I'm talking about normal times and going forward, because there was 4 years where the U.S. government bypassed the UN system over the last 4 years, and only people were really coming through embassies and not through the UN. But
Okay.
and going forward now, they will be going through the UN system. So once they've gone through an interview, there's a huge questionnaire.
Mhm.
um, designated as refugees, and then they kind of sit and wait for a long time.
Mhm.
And we have many different examples of where people waited forever, and other examples where people hardly waited at all. So, for example, the Bhutanese people, the Nepali people from Bhutan, they waited in refugee camps for 20 years
Mhm.
while different countries were negotiating whether or not they should go home, whether or not they should stay in Nepal, or whether they needed to be resettled. And it took 20 years to decide they need to be resettled, and that's when they came here.
Wow.
Another example would be the Kosovar Albanian refugees during the Kosovo conflict in the late 90s. They were resettled very quickly. They had gone into refugee camps in Montenegro and Macedonia and Albania. And this was on the news a lot at the time. So the American public said, we've got to help these people.
I
Um,
remember those stories. Yeah.
and the difference was suddenly peace came to Kosovo, and a lot of those folks went back.
Okay.
Actually, really, what the international community wants is for peace to come to a place and people can go home and be in their traditional homeland. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So who assigns them to the US? The UN would do that?
Um, I'm not sure exactly how it's decided who
I'm not.
goes where. Traditionally, the U.S. used to be the largest resettlement country, and
Mhm.
then also Australia and the UK and other European countries, but and Canada. Over the last few years, Canada bypassed us, so they were the number one resettlement. But we usually got most of them, and so it kind of went in that direction. So it would be decided, the folks from this camp are going to be going to the U.S. and then they just kind of draw numbers. Really, it doesn't really make sense how they decide who goes, except that once one family goes, usually family members of theirs would be next.
Mhm. Yeah, in general, the US has had an immigration policy of keeping families together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so a family in a refugee camp has been there, let's assume for a while, years. Um, and they're told, okay, you're going to Lansing, Michigan. Now what happens?
Okay, so they're told they're going to Lansing, Michigan. Then they start this really intensive security clearance process. So this usually takes a couple years at least. So they all their
After they know where they're going.
after they know where they're going, because then they're referred to the U.S. Embassy, and so the U.S. Embassy will start doing all of this processing, and they do fingerprints and biometrics and look at all of the information, and it takes a long time. And there's several different U.S. agencies that do that: Department of Homeland Security and the FBI and the CIA and I think the Postal Service. I don't even know who all like goes and does their security checks with them. And then they also do health checks. They want to make sure that they don't have any severe communicable diseases before they get on and travel, and that they're healthy enough to travel. And they do while they're there too. They go to a refugee or a resettlement service center, and that's where they'll get community orientation, cultural orientation about the U.S., explaining basic things so they're not completely shocked when they get off the plane, and just get them ready to board.
Okay, so let's say a family's been waiting 5 to 10 years at that point
Mm-hmm.
to come,
Mm-hmm.
however long, 3, 4, 5 years just to find out where they're going, and then another few years to get the clearance, and that can take longer depending on the size of family and what contacts they've had. If they've lived in other countries than just the 2 we're talking about at this point, all of that adds to a security clearance time. Uh,
Yep.
so finally, it all happens somehow, which, is almost like magic at that point because it's been so long. And they're on a plane, and that plane lands in Lansing in the middle of winter.
And say they're from Somalia, and yeah, they get off of the plane in their flip flops and their, you know, cotton clothes, yeah, and they're about to die because
So
it's so,
that's where you and the Lansing community come in. So
yeah.
what do we do?
So we are usually notified that somebody's arriving. So we send a survey. We work through the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. We're one of 9 resettlement agencies nationally, voluntary agencies. So with USCCB, all of these 9 agencies sit around every Wednesday, and they get these bios of each family from from overseas.
Mhm.
Every Wednesday, they sit and they go through these bios and they say, okay, I have a family of 10 from Somalia, and they have these health conditions, this educational background, they speak this language, they're this religion, who can take them?
Mhm.
And the agencies, they raise their hands and they take their stack of bios home with them, and then they'll look at who has staff who speak Somali, who have Islamic Center, who have employment opportunities for someone with this background, all of that. And then they'll look at Lansing and they'll say that we're very diverse and they love us because we can take almost anybody with almost any
Right.
issue. And so they'll send me an arrival notice. I'll look it over, make sure we really can take them. There are a few situations that we will not take people. One of them being we try not to take families if they have a small child who's seriously ill.
Mhm.
Don't have We don't have a children's hospital here,
Right.
and so we've had cases where kids with heart disease and things like that, they've
Mhm.
had to go to Ann Arbor or Grand Rapids, and it's just not good for the family. So we won't take those cases. But I look at every bio and make sure that we will take that case.
Mhm.
They usually about 6 months later will get their first arrival notice, and that'll give us a general idea of when they're coming into the country. And then that's when if they have family here, we'll call the family, let them know, Papa's coming. And that's when we start looking for housing for them
Okay.
because we need to identify that. That's one of our biggest challenges. Then we get another arrival notice 2 weeks after that. So that should have the flight information. So we'll know exactly when they're coming.
And for housing, you're just talking about, like, the housing we all live in. You've gotta find an apartment or a house to rent or something. I mean, it's not like there's a special place that refugees live.
No, and yeah, and we really want this to be their first home, and we know most of them will stay in this home for a while.
Mhm.
And so we want it to be as safe and comfortable and clean and beautiful and connected. We don't want people who are really far outside of town. We want them to be able to get on the bus to go places. And so yeah, so it's the same kind of apartments or houses that many of us would live in. Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, so the plane is you've got 2 weeks notice, the plane is coming.
Yeah, so we get the house and we get the house set up. So we work with landlords that allow us to actually move furniture in before the people come and sign the lease, which is
Yeah,
great. Um, we put food in the house, just a little bit of something for overnight, because all of our arrivals, for whatever reason, come very late at night.
yeah.
Um,
International flights.
it's where Lansing is because they go through
Yeah,
Chicago or Detroit.
right.
Um, and we get them a hot meal. So because they're starving when they get off the plane. So we get them a hot meal, we take them to their house, we let them eat, um,
Mhm.
then we do initial paperwork with them, and then we show them around their house, basic safety things, how the hot water works, how to lock the doors, what to put in the microwave, that kind of thing.
Because, of course, it may not be like any house they've ever lived in before.
Yeah, if they've been in a refugee camp in Congo for a long period of time, yeah, they've never seen anything like this.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So then we usually come back or we have to come back the next day, first thing in the morning. We'll do some more paperwork with them. We'll take them to the grocery store.
Mhm.
They can pick out all the food that they want and get them set up, get them a little cash so they have some money in their pockets. Do some orientation. Our case managers spend a long time with them explaining how things work, how to, call 911, whatever they need.
And is a lot of that done with translators?
Everything's done with translators, yeah. Unless they speak English. Yeah.
Mhm. But usually they don't. Usually you need a translator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we have group orientation classes. So when we're really busy, I do one every week, every Thursday for all new arrivals. It's just, more about the program and what services they're going to provide, where to store their social security card. There's actually a lot of stuff in there.
I
It's a
well, and
lot.
it would be for us if, any of us are going to live in Somalia, um,
Yeah,
permanently. These are not folks who are here for a vacation. Um,
right.
I mean, the learning curve must be huge.
It's huge. Yep. And we get them in English classes right away.
Great.
We take them to get their Michigan ID card and their Social Security card, and we help them roll in benefits and all of that. Um, We start doing some training classes because we want them to be employed as soon as possible so they can be rich Americans like us. We help them get there. They do a health screening. Everybody does a health screening when they get here and get vaccinated.
Mhm,
And, as soon as the kids are vaccinated, they're in school. So
mhm.
we get their school enrollments in there and get them going there. So yeah, and then we get them going. And
Yeah.
then we start our employment services, which are actually really easy compared to, 10 years ago. Employers here love working with refugees
Why?
because they're not trying to play any games, they're here, they want to make a life for themselves and they want to establish themselves. So they come in and they work hard and they do what they're supposed to do. And yeah, and they're ambitious and they might want to move up. So yeah, folks like working with them.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Are there some particular companies that you work with regularly?
Sure. Yeah. There's various grocery warehouses. There's laundries. There's hotels. There's lots of different places where people are working.
Yeah. Um, so how long has Lansing been doing refugee resettlement?
We've been doing this for over 45 years. So we
So there
started at the same time as the national program.
Oh, wow. So there must be a significant community of former refugees.
Oh yeah, yeah. So our resettlement has changed with the rest of the world, right? So we started off with Vietnamese and Cambodians and Lao and Hmong, and then in the 90s we had people from Poland and Bosnia and places like that. So we've changed Liberians. We've had I think 53 different countries have come through here. Very diverse, yeah.
Wow.
And it used
What
to be very crazy, like there wasn't a lot of structure to the program. I've heard stories of how people would just arrive and, end up in somebody's basement. You It wasn't until the last few years that it really became very structured. How
Yeah, wow. We work with a number of other refugee agencies in the area. So what services do the other refugee agencies offer? How do they help support this resettlement work?
So we partner with all of them. So we do the resettlement, and often, after we've done all the initial services and they've done the employment, we'll refer them over to the Refugee Development Center, and they do a lot of work with, especially education,
Mhm.
um, English classes for folks. They'll help intervene if there's some crises with people. It's a really good connection for all of our clients. And we're partnering them with them right now to do a laptop distribution program so we can get everybody laptops. There's also the Global Institute of Lansing. So that's a program that provides that helps people who arrived without a high school diploma, people of any age who are um, over the years that they can get a high school diploma here. So if they're 21 or older, they can go there and get a high school diploma. It's not a GED; it's an official accredited high school diploma from James Madison High School. So it's great. And then we also partner a lot with Samaritas. That's the Lutheran agency here. In Grand Rapids and Detroit, Samaritas does resettlement, but here in Lansing, they do the foster care program.
Mhm.
So they take kids who have been in foster care or in refugee camps without their parents for whatever reason. Maybe their parents died, maybe they had to flee without their parents.
Mhm.
Put them here and put them in foster homes.
They
Um,
may have fled with grandparents who then died, that their
yeah.
parents weren't able to leave their country and they came with grandparents.
In a lot of cases, my first kids came from Burma, and the young boys from Burma, especially, were really targeted by the government there
Mhm.
and threats, and so those boys had to leave. So
Yeah.
they left without their parents. Yeah,
Mm.
and it's a rough trek. It's not. I've heard their stories. It's not like my mom could have ever done that, or I could have ever
For
done that.
me, right, yeah, exactly, exactly, yeah, a whole other, world,
Hmm.
not just a different lifestyle, but a whole other world than what
Yeah.
we know. How is refugee resettlement funded in the US and with St. Vincent's in particular?
So our primary funding comes from the U.S. Department of State. the Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration. And they give us funding for every refugee who comes in. So they give us a sum of money, which is split, and part of it goes to the refugee and part of it goes to us to pay for our accountants and our case managers and our staff.
Mm-hmm.
That's our main funding source that keeps us going. We also get funding from the Department of Health and Human Services Office of Refugee Resettlement.
Mm-hmm.
And it pays for all of the other services, employment services. We have a match grant program, which is also an intensive employment program. We have extended intensive case management for people with medical conditions or mental health or disabilities. So that pays for all of those kinds of services. And then we get local funding as well. So we have a great relationship with the Ingham County Health Department. So they give us funding for health services. We have a grant right now with the city of Lansing that helps us do trainings in the community. And we have funding from Jackson National Foundation. So we get lots of donations as well from the people here who help us with that.
And kids who come as part of a refugee family, or if they come alone and are under 18, they're now residents in the community, so they participate in the public school system like anyone else can, right?
Yep. And the Lansing School District is a really great partner as well. They do lots of services, and they've really taken on this issue. And in their schools, they have what they call bilingual assistants. And these bilingual assistants will help to translate for new families coming in. So we just really come and we do the basic enrollment and for the families when they're coming in. And then the school district brings in their bilingual assistants and gives the kids a tour. And sometimes they do mental health assessments. So they do all kinds of stuff with the kids. It's really great.
Cool. So we know that over the past 4 years, immigration has been a hot topic, for lack of a better word. How have the policies of the last 4 years impacted refugee resettlement here and across the country?
Yeah, so it's been really, really hard. So just starting in January of 2017, our arrival numbers. So our grant with the Department of State is based per refugee. Mm-hmm. If our number of refugees coming in gets knocked down, we automatically lose funding. So
but you have fewer people coming. So isn't that a wash? Doesn't it come out even?
No, because especially for us, because we try to stay very diverse. So we do need multiple languages on staff. So every time we lose a person, we lose a language. So that hurts everything. And plus, we're still working with all these people who've been here for 5 years. So we continue to work with people who we resettled a long time ago. But if we don't have people coming in, it's hard.
You don't have any funding for them. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've lost 17 people over the last 4 years. Yeah. Some of them as layoffs, some of them as people who left and we just didn't replace. But that's not the funnest part of my job, is deciding who stays and who goes. And these are people who are very talented and understand the communities. And yeah.
So is it easy to hire a new Burundi speaker if that's what you need now, or a new Somali speaker?
No, it can be really challenging. I mean, case management and our services are very, very specific. There's lots of paperwork involved. There's lots of, structure and systems in place and they have to have computer skills, and there's lots of stuff, people need to know how to do before they start working for us. And of course, everybody wants to come in and I'm just going to give them everything. We have a lot of like yourself who want to come in and be case managers. And that's wonderful because they love them and they help them. But sometimes we have to be,
right.
Go to English class and, we can't always be, we have to be professional.
Yeah.
And have boundaries as well. Yeah. It's overwhelming.
It's definitely a tough gig.
Yeah.
So as I recall, and correct me if I'm wrong, in the last year of Obama's administration, he indicated that the U.S. would receive 120,000 refugees that year. Am I remembering that right?
I think it's 110.
Okay, 110.
He raised it from 85,000 to 110,000.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And so what were the numbers under the Trump administration each year? So each year, the president determines how many refugees the United States will accept through the UN system
Yes.
or overall.
Overall,
Okay.
yeah. The U.S. Refugee Assistance Project, yeah.
Okay. And the president alone gets to do that.
Yeah, that's part of the Refugee Resettlement Act of 1980.
Okay.
So that's a stipulation in there. Mhm.
So what were the numbers during Trump's administration?
Oh, let me back up. He
Okay.
he get to make that determination, but it's supposed to be in consultation with
Okay.
Congress.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it 2017 started at 110,000, which is what President Obama had put it at, and then President Trump, one of his first executive orders was to bring that down to 50,000.
Wow.
We got right about 50,000. So, and of course, everybody cut their programs in half.
Mhm.
And the next year, I think he took it to 45,000, and then 30,000. Gosh, I can't remember all. It just kept going down and down. This year, it was 15,000, which was just really the lowest ever. It was unimaginable, and we knew that that would really decimate the program. So we were anxiously waiting to see if that would hold.
Let's say even before the 110,000 in a normal year toward during Obama's administration, because obviously normal has changed over the history of the program, but sort of in the past decade, what how many refugees or refugee families, however you track that, would you receive per year?
Yeah, we would get about 600 a year.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's more than I thought.
2016, we got almost eight. We got over 800 because
Okay,
the Syrians started coming. But most years it was between 5 and 700.
okay. So how many did you receive last year?
69.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, it was really sad, and especially because we know that these are people who had they were separated from their families. There's a lot going on, especially over COVID, but even over the last few years. There's the Muslim bans and these moratoriums and all these different times when the resettlement would just stop, and we had people who they had their ticket in hand, and they're coming here to meet their brother or their husband or anybody, and it was just taken away at the last minute. So there was a lot of that kind of stuff went on, and that was really sad because there's nothing we could do.
Yeah. And so those folks just stayed where they were in a refugee camp, um, maybe in some other kind of housing if the country they're waiting in could provide that, but that's rare, right?
Right. Yeah, a lot of times in very dangerous.
Or in detention. In some countries, they're literally in prison
Yep, yep.
while they're waiting.
Especially the kids. A lot of the kids are the unaccompanied kids are in what we would consider a prison.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, so it's been in the news that Biden has ended the Muslim ban on immigration from the countries that Trump had named as prohibited. That's a good sign.
That's a huge success. Yeah.
Do we have other indications from Biden of how he's going to handle refugees in particular?
He has also indicated that he wants to raise the presidential determination to 125,000.
That's why I had that number in my head. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So, we're very excited about that. We're a little freaked out about that too, because, we got a lot to prepare to get back to those kinds of numbers.
You
But we're,
had 4 years of going down slowly, and now all of a sudden you have to jump back up.
yeah. Yeah. And we need money to be able to do that. So we're hoping that, Department of State realizes that and they'll give us a little money before we get that first arrival notice, because it'll be one arrival notice and then 40. We'll be really
Wow.
we've got to train staff, and we've got to, you know, look for the housing and rebuild our connections and all of that. That's kind of fallen apart over the last couple of years.
And will you have to rehire staff to handle those numbers?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and we don't know where people are going to be coming from, because that was also changed in the presidential determination. In the past, the presidential determination would be set up by region. And so they would say 10,000 from Africa, 15,000 from Asia, 20,000 from the Middle East, something like that, based on, and they would be particular countries based on the political situations of those countries. And in the last couple of presidential determinations, that's completely changed, and
Mm.
it was based on, except for they would say Northern Triangle, so they were trying to bring some folks in from Central America, which is great. But then they would also say people who've experienced religious persecution, um, and people who are of special interest to the U.S. So you know,
Which is a miscellaneous category. That means that they can determine that case by
well,
case.
and that's how they kind of went around the UN too.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the All Faith Alliance for Refugees, which is how I know you, an organization that we're both involved in, that is a part of or grew out of the Interfaith Clergy Group that I'm a member of.
Right.
Um, and All Faith Afar, as we call it, is 5 years old. Is that close?
Oh, I think it's even, well, it might even be more than that.
Okay.
We really started during before the last campaign for sure.
Okay.
That's when a lot of the negative rhetoric started.
Hmm.
And a lot of the faith leaders really wanted to get ahead of this and say this is not who we are.
Hmm.
Um, to be part of advocating for refugees and helping to educate the community about who refugees are and why it's important in almost every faith tradition to welcome strangers.
Hmm. Definitely. Um, one of the things that Afar has done is host a fundraiser in the last few years. And of
Mhm.
course, like everyone in the middle of COVID, that became almost impossible. So it wasn't a huge amount of money, but it was a little bit of money. And that's been gone over the last year, in addition to all the larger sources of funding, big chunks of the larger sources of funding. And the other emphasis or focus of AFAR has been awareness raising. So conversations like this in our churches, working with Refuge Lansing, which is worth taking note of. I'll include a link in the description, that has done some beautiful photographic work with refugee families, and helping our community to understand what refugee resettlement is and why we ought to care. Um, so funding is something that you need. Are there ways that people can other ways that people can support, um, whether it's St. Vincent's or other refugee agencies or refugees in general in our community?
Yeah, so like what you're saying, first of all, we're very grateful to afar and everything that they've done because we could not have done that, what we've been able to do without that kind of support. And the community in general here is so supportive. I mean, we're really lucky. I don't know if I could do a program like this in another kind of community.
Mm.
I've heard stories of resettlement directors who've been threatened and things like that, but I feel very well protected here. And I feel like the people here do like to see refugees in their communities and do like to see that diversity and do want to help. So there are lots of ways of helping. You can help the program in general if you just wanted to donate, on our website, stvcc.org. There's a place you can click on and donate right there, and that can help our program. If you want to send funding strictly for refugees, for example, we like to take gift cards. And for everybody who comes, like I said, we have Somalis who get off the plane in flip flops. We our interns will take every new family and take those gift cards, go to Meijer or Target or Walmart and get them boots or at least some warm shoes. So they get their first, set of new warm shoes as soon as they get here. And it's not something we can collect shoes because we don't have storage capacity to everybody be trying on their shoes. So yeah, that's a great way to do
Like
it.
a really bad bowling alley.
Yeah,
Not a
exactly.
good bowling alley, a bad bowling alley.
Right, right. We would accept donations if somebody wanted to write on there, for refugee housing. So, if we get somebody who's in trouble with their rent, and we've got a lot of that lately because of COVID. So we have a couple of grants that are helping us with that, some local grants. But anything like that, if you wanted to, you want to help with an interpreter or something like that, you can just write that on your check and that's where the money will go to. But we also like volunteers. We have volunteers. We love student interns. So if this is going out to students, please And students love working with us because they get to work with a new family, take them to Social Security office, do whatever. It's fun. They always start off freaking out, saying, well, I can't do that. I can't speak the language. And then as soon as they come back, they say, give me another one. I want to do another one because they have a lot of fun.
Yeah.
They get to buy them shoes and things like that,
Yeah.
which is fun.
You make friends and family. Yeah. And yeah.
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 And
Yeah.
right now we've got our interns are doing a lot of online tutoring and stuff as well. It's really, really necessary. And we know students really understand how to use different apps and softwares and things that'll help people to understand what's going on. So that's a big deal. There's also advocacy and doing things like this. Just we really like to get information out there about what the program is and who refugees are. So whenever we can do a presentation, to a class
Mhm.
or to a church or to a club or a community, we love to get out there and let people know what this program is and who folks are. And I mean, the best thing you can do is just when you see somebody in the grocery store that's struggling, be patient. They will learn English. It just doesn't happen overnight. And, just be friendly to them. They see the rhetoric that's been going on and they know that there's a lot of animosity out there for all kinds of people. And so just letting them know finally that they're welcome somewhere is a really big deal.
Maybe help them find the rice section or the bean section or the
Yeah,
produce section or whatever. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly.
That universal experience of coming to the US and getting frozen in the grocery store because it's so overwhelming.
Yeah. Yeah. And just not even understanding what the heck this stuff is.
Right. Yeah. Weird food. Yeah.
Yeah. Everything's in a box. Yeah.
Um, I wanna go back. This is where I my thoughts collided earlier. I wanna go back and talk a little bit about the numbers, because we were talking about how many numbers of people, refugees, the US will receive. And it may seem a little bit callous or dehumanized to talk about 120,000 and, then we draw the line at 110 or 125, whatever. How many countries are involved in resettlement? How are those numbers divided up? And why is it done kind of by numbers like that instead of just these people need homes?
Yeah. So I think that the number of countries, because, globally, there's been pushback and xenophobia that's happened. So, and plus, there's been kind of a huge push of asylum seekers into Europe. So, a lot of the European countries have kind of pushed back on resettlement a little bit. So, at the same time, Canada grew. So, I think, there are 12 to 15 countries that are doing this, mostly European, Canada, Australia, places like that. So I think at 125,000 people, we will definitely be the largest. But we have to keep in mind that the reason that we do this is it saves lives. I mean, we hear stories from our clients that you just cannot imagine what they've been through. Um, Congo, for example, we know that the refugee camps around Congo are some of the most dangerous places on earth for women, right? And there's all kinds of abuse that's going on there. Let's get them out of there and give them a chance at life. Um, 80 million people. If we take 125,000, that's a drop in the bucket.
Yeah.
And they help us. They're helping us, and they're keeping our employers happy. We have employers who've been calling us weekly for the
Mhm.
last 4 years, going, "We need bodies in here. We need people." And they relied on people because our employment structure, what we do is when we have a new person coming in, even if they do have some skills, they need like an adjustment. They need to learn how the American system works. They might need to learn a little more English, all of that. So they usually start off in entry level,
Mhm.
and then we work with them because we can work with them for up to 5 years.
Mhm.
Continue to work with them to upgrade them, and our employers like that service. So we'll have somebody, we'll get them into a job, they'll work their way up to a manager per se, and then we bring them in a new person. And so it's very cyclical. And
Mhm.
so, our employers all moved everybody up and we're not able to kind of replenish,
Oh,
you know,
right.
people who are starting off. And so it's really made them struggle not having these bodies in here. And even, it's interesting, even with COVID right now, and we're hearing so much about people who have lost their jobs or their jobs are on hold. There's still a lot of job vacancies out there. And these employers are really struggling, and we don't want to lose employers.
Yeah.
One of the warehouses where we work, they built a brand new warehouse in 2016, and we were booming. We were feeding them lots of people going in there, and then boom,
Yeah.
everything stopped. And so it's a challenge for all of them.
And replacing staff turnover is really expensive for companies. So if you can get employees that will stay and work up through your ranks, that's really good for a company. That's better than continually replacing employees.
And that's what we've heard from. We work through some temp agencies
Mhm,
because a lot of companies prefer to hire through temp agencies.
mhm.
Um, and they've said that, one of their biggest issues is people who don't want to stay. And one of the reasons that they really like working with refugees is they get in and they're going to stay there and they're just going to keep working there until they move up in that company or until they've got a degree. But it's quite a bit of time that they'll stay there, and that's really cost effective for every company.
So
They
do
don't-
you have former clients who are managers or in leadership positions in some of these companies that are now helping to train new refugees?
oh yeah. Another system or another process that we do is, so if we're going to work for a new company,
Mhm.
we start with a new manufacturing company, and they're not used to working with us. We'll start them off with some good English speakers, right? So there's
Sure.
one company I'm thinking of. We put in some young Afghan guys who spoke really good English.
Yeah.
So we started off there, and then as we brought in newer people, they were also Afghan, but they didn't speak as good English, and so those people moved up really fast, and then trained the new people.
Cool.
Yeah, it works really well for all of them.
So it really benefits us to continue to have refugees coming to the Lansing area to keep the system strong, both for their sake and for all the rest of us.
Yeah. Yep. And we got good businesses here out of it. We've got great international food.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can eat anything in Lansing.
Yep. It's
Yeah,
great.
yeah, yeah,
We
yeah.
want to promote that. We'd like to see more of that.
Cool. Anything else I should have asked you or didn't ask, or anything else you want to tell us?
No, I just want to say thanks to everybody for continuing to be supportive of what we're doing, and understanding what we're doing and why we're doing it, and just being a loving, open community to allow refugees to come here and get a start, get a life.
Yeah. Well, and thanks to you, Judy, and your staff and our other agencies who do this um, important and hard and really great work on behalf of all of us. I'm grateful. I know lots of others are. And thanks for this conversation.